this country is really dealing with sort of three pretty major crises. The coronavirus pandemic, we just talked about record unemployment, and of course, the protests against police brutality across the country. So CBS News wanted to kind of get a sense of how people are feeling. We have a new CBS News poll for you. And according to this new CBS News polling, it shows that 2/3 of Americans believe that the U.S. is on the wrong track. Of course, this comes just about 150 days away from the presidential election. So we want to bring in Karen Tumulty. Karen, you are a Washington Post columnist. You cover national politics. You cover national politics. So, sorry, Karen, what we're seeing is the overwhelming number of Black and white Americans and everyone else. They're uncomfortable with the direction of the country. We've seen the president, it looks like, make attempts to appeal to certain groups that may be losing faith in him, at least according to some other polling. What does this mean for the president now that he's seeking re-election at this time?
Well, the other thing we keep hearing him say is that, things are like going to rebound when overnight, so that the economy is going to look like it's in a completely different place. He better hope that, because there is really no number that political analysts look at more closely than this right track, wrong track number when they are trying to assess a president's prospects for being reelected. Because this, when an incumbent president is on the ballot, the election is a referendum on his performance. And CBS is not the first poll to show this. Just earlier this week, Monmouth had a very similar number. It was 70% of the population right now thinks the country is on the wrong track.
I guess, Karen, the question that I have is what's different this time around than 2016? In other words, the president had numerous scandals prior to the last presidential election. There was a tape of the president bragging about grabbing female genitals. There were the failures of his multiple businesses. All of those things were in the mix back in 2015, 2016. They didn't seem to have a dent in the support of his base. What is different now, even given all of that has occurred? I understand, obviously, now that it's not just people who got suckered into Trump University or some of his other business failures. These are Americans, 100,000 plus Americans who have died because of the administration's lack of proper response in the early weeks to the coronavirus. Now you've got the entire country coming apart at the seams. But I wonder if that's enough to dent the support that he has with his base, because he is still competitive when it comes to vis-a-vis Joe Biden.
What's different now is he's the president. In 2016, he was promising basically come to Washington and, throw a grenade in the place to change everything, to upend everything. And there was a mood for that in the country. Now people are looking at it and, again, looking at his performance. And does he have probably a pretty hardcore base of support somewhere probably in the high 30s? Yes. But that's not going to win re-election for him. And in some of these swing states, too, basically the election, as we learned in 2016, is going to come down to 4 or 5 key states. And the president is, at this point, underwater in just about all of them. He's also underwater in places where he shouldn't be, places like Arizona, which has been a strong Republican state for quite a while now. So the president's team is getting very concerned about this, as is he. But this is all about performance.
So can we talk a little bit about a couple of groups that are supposed to be kind of dependable voters for him? One, you talk about in your most recent article, it's the over 65 crowd. But I also kind of wanted to talk about evangelicals that I'm hoping you know a little bit more about. There's some recent polling about older adults and the support for President Trump chipping away. There has been the suggestion that when he slashed the prices of insulin, that was an attempt to appease that demographic. And also that, when he strolled over to the church for that photo op, that was also sort of a nod to evangelicals. What's happening in terms of his support with those two groups, and why do things seem to be changing if they are?
Well, there are a number of polls that have come out lately that show that the president is trailing Joe Biden by as much as 10 percentage points among over 65 voters. This should not be a group that he is struggling with. Senior voters have voted for the Republican candidate in every single election since 2004. Al Gore in 2000 was the last Democrat to win voters over 65. And that was a different generation of elderly voters. Those were people who had come of age, in the politics of the New Deal. They had deep Democratic loyalties. This is a different group, and Donald Trump is losing them badly. Evangelicals, though, I'm not really sure that they have budged. That, a lot of the things that they really care about, starting with all of those judicial nominations, they really believe that Trump has sort of come through that. Of him standing in front of a church holding a Bible, that may play better with evangelicals than it does with, say, some of the other mainstream religions.
Karen, as you know, the president has recently taken to tweeting silent majority in all caps. He's done that a bunch of times. And I just find it remarkable that this president, I wonder if you have heard from people close to the president, does he understand what that term means and how it was used? Because it just strikes me as remarkable that the president would still want more associations with Richard Nixon, who used that term, silent majority, in a speech that he gave in 1969. Why is the president using a series of words that was used by a president who was in danger of being impeached for corruption?
Well, of course, Richard Nixon went on to win a landslide re-election after that. What the Trump team is obviously trying to do is replay the conservative politics of the late 1960s, not just with silent majority, but just the way he uses the phrase law and order. And also, even, he went so far as to directly quote an infamous quote from the sheriff of the police chief of Miami, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. At some point, these are not just coincidences that Trump is appropriating this language.
Yeah, it's so true. Karen Tumulty, really good speaking with you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to speak with you again because you offer some really great insight. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.